What is the creepiest/strangest thing that has happened to you or a friend or family member that creeps you out to this day? Lived in the Hollywood Hills and this happened in the early 80s. Crazy knocking at my door at 9 p.m. I go to answer the door and there's a lady there just hysterical, talking about there's so much blood. She looks normal and is dressed in clean clothing, so we let her in. She tells a story about seeing someone get stabbed. I call the police and 2 uniformed LAPD officers arrive in 10 minutes. They take the lady away and tell us that she was reported missing, has a mental condition, and lives up the street. All good. 30 minutes later, another knock at the door. 2 different cops this time, responding to the call. They have no idea who the other 2 cops were. Take our information and statements, description of the officers and the lady as well. Radio conversations back and forth ensue, and they really don't have any idea how any other cops could have picked her up, because they were given the call 40 minutes ago. Could have been jurisdiction overlap. When I was a kid, my parents owned a house right where 3 jurisdictions overlapped. So you could call 9-1-1. It was a bad neighborhood, so it happened fairly frequently, and you might get all 3 jurisdictions showing up for the call or none, because they all thought the others would take care of it. I had to take care of my mentally handicapped cousin a few years back. She could get around well enough, but due to severe arthritis in her knees and ankles, she had to be watched, helped into the bath, shit like that. I would go into her room in the morning, help her to her walker, so she could piss, and make her breakfast. One morning I heard the water running in the bathroom. When I went to check in on her, I had to pass her room on the way to the bathroom. When I did, I saw that she was in her rocking chair in the corner, her blanket over her head, and she was rocking back and forth. Don't leave the water on, you're going to flood the place. I went into the bathroom to shut the faucet off, and my cousin was there, washing her face. I immediately ran back to the room, but it was just her blanket crumbled up in the rocking chair. My cousin wanted to know why I undid her bed. I didn't stay too long after that. When I was 7 years old, my mom gave birth to my little sister. Me and my dad went to visit her in the hospital to check out the new family member. As 7-year-olds often do, I got bored, so my parents sent me to the kiosk right outside the main building to get an ice cream. As I was walking towards the kiosk, I cut over the lawn as it was a shorter walk. Suddenly I feel and hear a really heavy thud right behind me. I turn around to see the warped, mangled body of man in a hospital gown maybe 40 to 50 centimeters from where I was standing. The man had jumped off the hospital roof after receiving news he had terminal cancer. My mom and out of the others in the birth ward even saw the guy flying past the windows. The guy basically just fell short of killing me with him. A group of doctors and psychiatrists asked me to get emergency therapy, but I insisted on getting my ice cream and go home. This day I can still recall the thud of the body hitting the ground and his body lying there next to me, clear as crystal. I still tell this story sometimes, mostly when I'm drunk or high. I don't know why it comes up, but I think shit stuck with me. Edit. Hey guys. Seems like this was a popular story, so I'm going to answer some of your questions. I believe it was a pistachio cone ice cream, which is the freaking best. My parents were very considerate and really wanted me to talk to them or someone about it, but I feel like at the time the concept was too extreme for me to grasp, and it felt scary and unnecessary for me to talk about. I mean, the guy was dead and I'm still alive, so I guess ice cream therapy was the way to go. I have talked to them about it in later years. To the guy doubting the story, my mother was still in the hospital and got told it was a suicide, not an accident, and it was related to the poor guy's bad news. As I explained, I cut over a lawn, so it did not happen directly by the entrance. Believe me, I wish this was not a true story at all. I do not think him traumatized in a way that affects my life. But when you drink and do drugs, stuff comes up and sometimes it feels good just talking about it in a sort of duck yes I'm alive fashion. I'm sorry if my wording and spelling is not top grade, as English is not my first language. Life rules. And I love my family. My boyfriend works night shift, and I was asleep alone in the house. I get woken up in the middle of the night by my puppy whining in the living room, and I assume it's because he wants outside. I'm just about to open the back door when I hear this weird scratching / clicking sound at the front door, like someone was sticking something in the lock. I go to check, and I can see the silhouette of somebody standing there through the window in the door. I then notice there is a second figure in the living room window, although it's too dark to make out any features. I know they can see me because I didn't have any blinds at this point, and they just stood there. I totally freaked and called the cops, then my dad. I huddled in the kitchen out of sight of any windows and waited for someone to come. My parents live across town and showed up before the cops. They were gone at this point, but the neighbors across the street were up and saw the car. I ended up staying at my parents' place that night, and when I came home the next morning, I noticed the basement window was partially kicked in. I got a security system installed the next day. I still have no idea who it was. My money says it was security system Salazar. Damn them and their hard sell. I have a story that didn't happen to me, but rather my friend's dad. This guy isn't the type to bullshit, so I believe him 100%. My friend's dad, we'll call him Jack, and his brother, we'll call him Tom, lived with each other in the 80s. It was just the two of them living in the house, no one else. So, this one night Jack is coming home at night and walks into his living room to see a bunch of old people sitting around talking. As he walks in, they all just quiet down and awkwardly look at him as he walks by. He doesn't see Tom anywhere, so he just assumes Tom will be back to tend to his guests. Jack has work the next morning, so he goes in his room to get some sleep, but is kept up from all the people talking. He walks out from his room and is promptly met up with Tom, who is coming out of his room to tell Jack to keep his friends quiet. However, Jack was coming out to tell Tom to keep his friends quiet. They walk out from the hallway into the living room only to see that it's empty with the leftover smell of musk. Secret ghost society? I'd love that, they sound fun. Well, I'm late, but whatever. So about 2 years ago I was in my room reading a book when I hear it. Soft as ever, two little girls giggling. Not just any giggle. It was the kind of giggling you hear in horror movies. I immediately put down my book and listened. After about a minute of holding my breath, I decided it must have come from outside. Then that night, just as I'm about to drift off to sleep, I hear it again. Two little girls giggling. Now it was 2 AM, and I was pretty damn sure there weren't two little girls outside my window at that time of night, so I began to freak out. I sat up in my bed and waited for what felt like forever, just listening. Then I hear it again. I jumped out of my bed and go spend the rest of the night in the guest room. By the next morning I was convinced my room was haunted. For the next week I avoided my room and spent my nights in the guest room unbeknownst to my family. I was afraid to tell anyone for fear I was going crazy or they wouldn't believe me. But every time I spent more than an hour in my room I would hear those two little girls giggle. By the end of the week I was a mess. I could barely sleep and was terrified of my room. Then one morning my brother walks up to me and says, "You deaf or something?" Obviously I was confused, and after further questioning he tells me about this small device he had placed in my room. Apparently it's like some sort of prank device that's easily hidden and can make a variety of different noises. My brother however chose the creepiest duck little girls giggling sound. He wondered why I hadn't heard it or said something about all week, and I just wanted to punch him in the face. So my room wasn't haunted after all. Moral of the story, sometimes your brother is just an asshole. Lol, you have to admit that he got you. When my aunt was in college she took a night lab class that would let out late. One night she was walking back to her car and someone came up behind her, pressed something into her back, and told her to keep walking. Suddenly a man coming toward her who she had never met before looked at her, threw open his arms for a hug, and said, "How are you? I haven't seen you in so long." He then whispered, "Play along. He has a gun." My aunt immediately played along, hugging back and acting excited to see this stranger. The guy who was behind my aunt quickly backed off and walked away. The hero took my aunt to the nearest emergency alert post, pushed the button for her, and told her to stay put while he went to get help. He never returned.
you.